On 14 February 1990, the Voyager 1 spacecraft was 6.5 billion kilometres from home. At the request of astronomer Carl Sagan, NASA turned Voyager 1 around to take a picture of our home, planet Earth. The resulting photograph, which captured Earth in a ray of sunlight, showed our home as one tiny pale dot in a vast nothingness. The pale blue dot was a phrase coined by Carl Sagan, and the photo showed how alone we are in the universe and put our very existence into perspective, a tiny speck of dust in the universe. In this series of podcasts, your host Gregory Pfeiffer looks at facets of life on this pale blue dot we call home. Hello and welcome to the latest episode. In the Paul Simon song, You Can Call Me Al, there is lament where Paul sings, "Who'll be my role model now that my role model has gone?" And it's an interesting point to think about the role of role models in our life, how we pick them, why we pick them, and what influence they have on us. First question we have to think about though is what do we term as a role? And this has been an interesting debate that has gone on over a period of time. For example, is someone a waiter, or is waiter a role that somebody goes to work, acts in the role of a waiter, and then stops being a waiter as soon as they leave work? So it's identifying whether a role is part of us, that is what we are, or is it something that we go and behave in that way for a certain time. We fulfill that role and then we exit acting in that role. So the idea of role models comes down to, what are these people actually modeling? Are we expecting them to model a certain role, or are we looking them to model behaviour for life for us and how we should act as a person? Role models can sometimes also be confused with the idea of people we may have idolised, or they may be our heroes. So this idea of hero, idol and role model has often been conflated, and particularly in these days, I think that is what goes on. Over a long period of time, if we look at who has filled this role of a role model or who has been worshipped, we'll tend to look at, in ancient times, and there may have been great leaders, there may have been politicians, gladiators or generals or figures of war, or people in an athletic or sporting arena. And this seems to have gone on over history. We can possibly then throw in some figures from religion as well, which then brings us to recent times and who have we picked as role models. Looking back over decades, it seems to be the same pattern, and who gets put up as a role model. And one of the biggest areas where people are put as role models is in the sporting arena. And you'll often hear sports people complain about the fact that they're there to play sport. They are not there to be a role model. But by virtue of the fact that they're being paid a lot of money and they're in the public spotlight, they're now being thrust into the role of being a role model. There we go, there's a role of a role model. And many feel they're unwilling to do that. So is this the right sort of person we should be thinking of to pick our role models? Who should we be modelling ourselves on? If we have a look at, or trying to list who have been role models over the last century or so, can we go back to some great people? There might have been names like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, who exhibited something in the political sphere. Outside of that, we seem to be falling back into the same pattern that has existed for a long time. We have looked at our sporting greats, be they our Pelés and Maradonas, particularly in the football word, some of the biggest names that have been around. And even that pervades now. Seems to be sporting world, seems to be the home of a lot of role models. But you must think growing up and who we do model yourselves on, but also historically, who do we have available as role models? In days going back before we had mass communication and versions of mass media, your role models might have been born by a story, they might have come out of religion, but they were probably someone in your community. But people lived in smallish communities for vast periods of time. Mass cities and towns and mass centres of population are only a relatively new phenomenon. So we lived in communities and family groups, extended families, tribes, where we basically knew everybody. So our models for how to behave, how to act, would have been people that we knew. Hopefully the role of your parents would have been great role models for you, and I'm sure a lot of you have modelled your behaviour on your parents. But we live in a different era now. We have a lot of mass communication, we have media, we are exposed to a lot more people. We are shown and told the stories of a lot more people. So the choices of where do I get my guidance from, how do I behave as a person, we now have a lot more choices available. If we go back to a previous podcast and just ask the question, can you say, who am I? Do you know who you are? And that asking this question and answering this question was the foundation for growth, personal development. Having answered that question, we then move on to, well, who can give me guidance to be the sort of person I want to be? Or we might have influence to believe, what sort of person do I need to be? And these influences may come from what we see on the media and through social media. It now seems to be an area where role models are now people who have popularity. And we have seem to have a lacking of people who are great people. We seem to have people who are popular or who have achieved success in a particular avenue. So success seems to be our criteria for picking role models. Are they successful business people? So it might be our Steve Jobs and our Elon Musk. Our success, particularly in entertainment, musicians, actors, might be success in the sporting arena. Or they are people who seem to be well known, possibly for just being well known. We also have, through the media and social media, this new category of person who is called an influencer. And that is their purpose, is to influence behaviour, to set trends, to change our minds, to try and model behaviour to get us to act in a certain way. And we're being flooded with all these images that purport to say, this is how we need to act, this is how we need to be, this is what the average person looks like, this is an average lifestyle. If you're not doing this, you need to be doing this. And questioning our worthiness, often in a very superficial and materialistic sense. Do we look right? Do we own the right things? Are we living the right lifestyle? According to these perhaps good-looking people who have achieved wealth and somehow have achieved success. A comment that was made recently, and I found this really interesting, was that this problem with picking role models and influencers was a big issue now for men in general, but particularly younger men developing from sort of, through that teenage 20s, 30s era. Their reasoning behind this was that we have stopped talking about men, that a lot of the narrative now is to talk about women, to talk about women's issues, to address a lot of what has been the imbalance, where women have been poorly treated and have been held back, and there have been behaviours that have discriminated against women, and the need to bring about this equality and remove these barriers to their progression, their advancement, achieving the sort of goals that men have been able to achieve. So while we've all been talking about empowering women, and there's lots of talk about how women need to act and behave and succeed, we haven't talked about men. We've stopped talking about what men need to do, how men should behave, what is a good role model for men. And this has created a vacuum. And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum, so people have come in to fill this vacuum. So if we suddenly have a lack of society talking about men, then people will start gravitating towards who is talking about men and men's issues. And we now find that social media can be the home. This can be the source of information, the internet. Who is talking about men? Who is talking about men's issues? And we now find that our younger men in particular, but not exclusively, are listing people as their influences, perhaps people like Jordan Peterson, particularly people like maybe Joe Rogan, Andrew Tate. People who are talking about men on social media, and these are their influences. Now, whether you agree or disagree with their views on the behaviour of men, the fact is they are the ones that are talking about it. And there is a serious lack of a counter-narrative going on how men should behave, how we should develop, where we need to be in life. We also look at perhaps some of the sporting area and UFC. I think it's Conor McGregor, for example, has been someone who's very popular amongst young males, who I think idolise perhaps the lifestyle for it. I think there was the swagger, the confidence, and there was certainly some characteristics of Conor that are admirable in there. But when we often look at these people, again, all we see is a certain aspect of them and a certain part of their behaviour. So we need to realise that often they are very good at a certain role, be it a businessman, they may be a good sports person, they may be a good UFC fighter, they may have lived or appear to live a lavish lifestyle that we wish we could aspire to, and we see these little snippets. But we take them on as a whole package, as a role model. And whilst we may recognise one of their roles they have been successful in, there seems to be this ability to encompass their whole lifestyle, their whole person, as a model for our behaviour, what we should aspire to, how we should behave. And I think this needs some critical thought. Many people that have been successful in one area are absolutely horrible people. They've been terrible in other areas, and this has been shown quite recently. So whether it be right or wrong, various parts through the Me Too movement has uncovered some terrible behaviour from people that have been very popular, well known, highly respected in a certain aspect, their media industry, television, on screen. But there's also been another side to them where they really weren't a good person. And this now is the difference between what our traditional role models may have been when we modelled ourselves on people we knew and knew the whole person, versus using role models where we just see slivers of the person, slivers of their life, only know those certain aspects of people. This detachment from our role models is what's really significant from previous eras to probably where we're getting at in the last 100 years or so. Through media, newspapers, through now television, and then through the internet, there are people that we will never meet, we will never know, we will never directly interact with, we will never know that person, but we will be influenced by them. So I think a lot of the aspect of why do we pick these people, why are we influenced to think as other people think, again comes back to a lack of confidence in ourselves and a lack of knowing who we are and who you are as a person. And a lot of these images that constantly says that you aren't good enough, particularly with men. Unfortunately, a lot of the talk in the media and when men are turning up in the media is related to domestic violence, acts of violence. Someone's been shot or killed, or there's just looking at the news, criminals, and this is where men are being portrayed. There is not too many stories coming out about men doing well, and where are our stories about men who are leaders and men who are living a good lifestyle? The sensationalist nature of the media likes to talk about sensation. It likes to, crime. This is what it thinks interests us. Unfortunately, men feature too heavily in that aspect of behaviour, or it is shown that way by the media. And we can find out that when anyone is talking about men, they're only talking about the problems with men, about what they're doing wrong. So if you're someone, say, between 15 and 30, what information are you getting? If you sit down and watch the news and look at the papers, what idea would you form about this is what a man is and these are the people that I'm seeing? It's not great. It's not good at all. There is not a great deal of discussion about the positive aspects of man, and really this is what being a man entails. This is what it should be doing. These are role models for life, not just for business, not just who made $1 million, not successful in sport, as a person. Who's your role model that tells you this is how I need to act as a father, as a good partner? This is how men should be treating women. This is the role model for respect for people. This is our role model for actually good behaviour on the sporting field. We don't go and violence and the fights and the anger that we see and the angst. Where are examples of men being leaders and being contributors to the society? Where are we hearing about these good role models within our community? Because they're there. There are people outside, it could be next door, it could be a street away, that are doing wonderful things in your community, people who really are great people and doing things that could be served as good role models, but we don't know about them. There is an issue where single parent families in Australia are now 15% of families. 15% are single parent, and of those, about 80% it is the mother only. So we also know that there is a very small amount of teachers in primary school level that are male, and it is less than 50% of teachers in high school that are male. So our boys who are growing up, it is possible they would get through a lot of their schooling, they'd get through primary school and have never had a male teacher, and through high school even they could have limited exposure to male teachers. And this used to be one of the areas where you could get exposed to models of behaviour, good behaviour, in the days when teachers were a respected person in the community and their behaviour was something that we'd look at and be exposed to. Remember, I wonder if we would be able to make the movie Dead Poet Society now. Would we have a movie now that shows the respect that someone had for one of their teachers or their professors? Unfortunately, I suspect it would probably go the other way. So possibly from a young age, we could be finding that, in particular the men, are lacking some role models on what it is to be male and what it is to be men. So possibly it's not surprising that they will seek it from other avenues, and that the die is cast at an early age to go and seek advice from other sources when there is a lack of male figures in their life exhibiting behaviour showing this is what it is to be a male and to be a good male, hopefully. So the point comes down to we need to be, I think, a lot more critical in who we pick as a role model and ask ourselves, why am I modelling my behaviour on that person? What is the aspect of them that I truly want to learn from? Because this is truly the role of a role model, is to learn from them and to model some positive behaviour to make yourself a better person. Learn from someone who does something that you do better than you do. Find people who do this. But it also comes down to knowing what your definition of a better person is. Now, this is going to be hard for you to define what is the best version of myself when I'm being flooded by images that suggest if I'm not living in a mansion, driving a flash car, making lots of money, having successful relationships, and this fake lifestyle, if I'm not doing that, I'm not succeeding. If women haven't built the booty, if they don't look this way, and that's been a terrible thing on women's side, and I'm sure contributes to a lot of the body shaming, is this promotion of ideal bodies. And it's really interesting now that one of the movies we have coming out this week, or came out last week to great success, is Barbie, when probably Barbie could represent the ideal of the unachievable woman, the physique that was unrealistic, that you could not achieve, and yet everyone wanted to be. Little girls wanted to play with Barbie. They wanted this Barbie lifestyle. They wanted the Ken partner. And it was known that the waist on Barbie was so ridiculously thin that it was just basically not achievable by females. But this is what they were being exposed to. So there definitely have been issues for women, particularly on that side of body image, what is healthy, what I should look like, how I should dress, based on unrealistic role models. The other interesting part is, what is the other movie coming out that came out this week? Is a movie called Oppenheimer, which is about a scientist and partly also about his moral dilemmas. He was involved heavily in the development of the nuclear bomb. He then became opposed to it being used, held some strong views, and was basically persecuted for holding those strong views. But he maintained them. He showed that strength to hold his views and to campaign against basically what he'd developed. So this is one of the rare cases we have got a movie showing a strong male figure, and it's strange. It's a scientist. It's not about a sportsman or not a usual people that we hold movies out to be. So I really think this has been a wonderful change that we've been able to make a movie about a scientist, and now everyone is talking about Oppenheimer. So this is a fantastic development, I think, on the men's side. Not so sure about the promotion of Barbie, but hey, maybe it's a good time. It may be an hour and a half, 2 hours of just light entertainment that we take nothing from. Possibly nothing wrong with that. So, to wrap up, what I'd ask you is to have a look at your role models. Possibly try and think about people that are closer to home. Think about looking at people you actually have an affinity with, you have a connection with, you know a lot more about what they do. And making real connections in the social media age can be a big ask. But it's great to put down the phone, the computer, and get out and open your eyes and see what is around you. Look for the real people and look for real examples of good people doing things that you truly can model yourself on. That shows the aspects that you would like to emulate and say, yes, I would like to do that, or this to me is how you should act. I can act this way. They can do it. I can do it too. It is having some belief in yourself. It is about making a choice to be a better person and a good choice of what a better person is, and then finding the people, the real people, critical analysis of who you then pick as a role model to help you develop to become that person. Possibly even it's a case of being independent and throwing it, saying, I don't need to role model, I know what sort of person I need to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. I'm sure there are some very driven people who have an inner fire that can do that, and that will certainly work for those people. They have just know where they need to be, they know what they want to be, they're singularly focused, and they will get there. Others may find we just don't have that picture. Our purpose, our meaning, who we are is just not developed, it hasn't set. We just don't really understand ourselves yet. So understand yourself, and as I said, look a bit closer to home, be more critical about your role models, be able to take a certain aspect of their behaviour that you think is good, but don't have to encompass all of their behaviour and be that person and be all of their lifestyle. Be choosy, be discerning, pick the parts that apply to you and that you believe are lessons or instructional, educational. If you can do that, pick, this person does this well, but they don't do that well. This person does this well, but they don't do that well. Look at it that way, and don't fall into the trap of idol worship, which is where you believe they're great at one aspect, therefore they are great in all aspects of life. So separate those two parts. Be discerning, be more critical, and that can only result in you having better choices as to how you model your behaviour. So here on planet Earth, we are all alone. At a level of humanity, we don't have someone else to ask. We don't have another civilization out there to go and model ourselves on, or to ask for help, or to ask for guidance. It is perhaps interesting that so many societies created gods who are out there in the sky, out there in the universe, to be our models and to provide guidance for life. Perhaps there is this hope that there really is someone else out there. But for the moment, there's not. So at the level of humanity, it is up to us to be successful in deciding how we act and our behaviour. Because we don't have anyone else to model ourselves on. There is no other template. Thank you for joining the podcast. If you've enjoyed it or been stimulated by it, please share with other people. Please leave comments or contact on your thoughts. And where possible, if you leave a review with your thoughts to help the podcast grow. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of others. Bye for now.